On this Tuesday night from Juno Beach in France, Canadian veterans making a final journey.
I have friends here, very dear. It's the last chance to say goodbye.
Remembering the sacrifice and honoring those lost on D-Day 80 years ago. The future of refugees hoping for a new life in Europe.
Wunderschöne Zeit für mich.
It was a wonderful time for me. People were so happy to welcome us. I felt very much at home.
As European attitudes to immigration harden.
Back here in Canada, demanding answers. The mounting mystery after a damning report revealed some MPs participated in foreign meddling. And the ethics questions about this federal cabinet minister's business dealings. The text messages obtained in a global news investigation and his response.
Global National with Dawna Friesen, reporting tonight from Juno Beach in France.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are on Juno Beach in northern France to mark a remarkable moment. The beaches all along here on June 6, 80 years ago were a battleground. It was the largest air, naval and land operation in history. The goal was to liberate Northwest Europe from Nazi domination and ultimately defeat Hitler. 150,000 Allied forces, including 14,000 Canadians, took part. And what they did changed the course of history. Hearing firsthand accounts from those who witnessed D-Day is increasingly rare. Those still alive are mostly 100 years old now or older. Exceptional not only that they are still with us, but that some made the trip here from Canada. They are back in Normandy, 80 years after D-Day. Not fighting fit anymore, but here to tell their stories and to say goodbye. William Wilson came from High River, Alberta. Why did you want to be here for this?
I have friends here, very dear. Yeah. It's the last chance to say goodbye. Simple.
He joined the Navy at 18 and turns 100 in November. Others who hoped to be here never made it. I spoke with Bill Cameron in BC in March. He was 19 when he volunteered for the Navy and knew he'd be heading to war. What did your parents think?
Well, I guess they didn't think much of it. You don't look at the grim side of things.
He was on HMCS Kitchener, manning an anti-aircraft gun. For months, protecting ships crossing the North Atlantic.
That was hectic because the Germans were in the North Atlantic with their subs, and they were sinking as many ships as they could. And we were lucky we didn't get sunk.
And on D-Day, he was on the only Canadian corvette to take part in the invasion of Normandy, protecting American troops on Omaha Beach, which was bristling with German guns.
And our job was to shoot to protect these guys landing on the beach. And Omaha Beach was an awful beach. It was the worst one of them all. I was scared to death, the same as the rest of them. But I figured, hey, it's either them or us.
He shot down so many enemy planes, the French awarded him the Legion of Honor, the country's highest order of merit.
In case it's a little warmer, we can have this, you can wear this one.
Good idea, Donna.
Last week, Bill was packed and ready to go to Normandy. Sadly, 8 hours before he was set to leave, he suddenly passed away. He was 100 years old. His family gave us their blessing to tell his story. He will, his daughter said, be watching over Juno Beach. His voice, too, now fallen silent, along with all the Canadian soldiers who never made it home. 2,044 Canadians are buried at this cemetery in Normandy, including 19 who were never identified. "13 veterans from the Second World War were able to make the trip here, and some of them were at the opening of a new wing of the Juno Beach Center today. It showcases how Canada has developed since the Second World War. The center was built in 2003 to recognize and commemorate the sacrifices made by Canadians who were part of the Allied victory in the Second World War. Fundraising is underway to expand it even further. I'll be back from Normandy a little later with a look at how immigration is driving the political agenda here in Europe, potentially threatening the freedom Canadians and others fought and died for here. But first, Farah Nasser has the rest of the day's news. Farah.
Thank you, Dawna. We turn now to the political fallout following those damning findings detailed in yesterday's NSICOP report. The Liberals are refusing to say which federal politicians wittingly cooperated with foreign interference schemes that included revealing secrets to foreign states. Mercedes Stephenson has been digging into the explosive report. Mercedes, why isn't the federal government releasing their names?
Farah, a day after the bombshell allegations, we still don't know who the parliamentarians are, the parties they belong to, which foreign countries they were allegedly helping, or whether they are members of parliament or senators. The Liberal government was asked several times today to identify the parliamentarians in question, but refused to do so.
I have a lot of confidence in CSIS and the RCMP to do the work that they're required to do under law.
Our government takes foreign interference very, very seriously.
While the Minister of Public Safety and the Deputy Prime Minister both mentioned the RCMP, there is no information from the government or the RCMP to indicate whether or not there are ongoing police investigations at this time. The report warned it would be very difficult to bring charges against those allegedly involved, owing to outdated laws on foreign interference in Canada. Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre did not ask a single question about the report during question period. Instead, it was the NDP and the Bloc Québécois demanding action.
I believe if there's any evidence that someone knowingly worked with a foreign government to influence our democracy, they should no longer be a member of parliament.
Farah, there are more questions than answers on which sitting parliamentarians may have been acting as domestic collaborators with foreign powers, and whether or not we'll know their identities before Canadians go to the polls.
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. Thank you, Mercedes. First, it was London Drugs, a major Western Canadian pharmacy and retail chain. Then, Ticketmaster. In recent weeks, Canadians have had their data compromised by cyber criminals. Tonight, a warning from Canada's Auditor General that 3 key federal agencies, including the RCMP, are falling short when it comes to protecting Canadians from these threats.
We found that these organizations have neither the capacity nor the tools to effectively fight cybercrime.
The Auditor General's review found staffing shortages, lack of coordination, and ignorance on how to properly deal with cyber threats. In one instance, Canada's communications regulator, the CRTC, learned about a child exploitation incident. Instead of forwarding the information on to law enforcement, the agency asked the individual to report the incidents to police themselves. It's not known if that happened. And a big change tonight from Canada's telecom regulator. Online streaming services must now pay into a fund to help create Canadian content. The Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission is directing Netflix, Spotify and other streamers to put 5% of their annual Canadian revenue into the fund. It's expected to add about $200 million into the broadcast system every year to boost local, French language and Indigenous programs. So far, no comment from the streaming services. Canada's Ethics Commissioner says he is looking into the business dealings of Liberal Cabinet Minister Randy Boissonnault. The reverse course from Commissioner Konrad von Finckenstein follows Global News' reporting about the minister's ties to a lobbyist and medical supply company embroiled in lawsuits. Boissonnault says he's followed ethics and lobbying rules, but as Krista Hessey reports, new text messages obtained by Global News raises questions about the minister's potential involvement in a business deal a year after he was elected.
I have had no operational involvement in this company since I was elected.
Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault fielded questions from Ethics Committee members about his ties to a lobbyist and a medical supply company. The central question is whether Boissonnault broke ethics and lobbying rules by using his position in government to benefit his former business associates Kirsten Poon and Stephen Anderson, and whether the minister himself benefited. Global News revealed Boissonnault accepted payments from Poon, who lobbied a department where he was associate minister at the time. His office says those are very delayed payments from work completed in 2020 and 2021.
When was the last time you received money from her?
There were no monies were received by any company that I'm responsible for from Ms. Poon in 2024.
Questions also focused on Global Health Imports, or GHI, a company Boissonnault co-founded in 2020 with Anderson while he was out of office. He was re-elected a year later and says he then resigned from GHI. But texts obtained by Global News raise questions as to whether Boissonnault may have discussed a business deal with Anderson while he was serving as a cabinet minister. Boissonnault denies the allegation. Malvina Gowie, owner of the Gowie Group, a PPE company, received texts from Anderson pushing for a deposit on a purchase. Anderson forwards her a text from a person he calls Randy, asking why it hasn't been sent yet and to be available in 15 for a partner call. 30 minutes later, Gowie got another message from Anderson saying he has spoken to Randy. In a statement, the Gowie Group said it has not had any direct communication with Boissonnault, but that Anderson had told Gowie Boissonnault was a partner in GHI and a public official. The Edmonton Centre MP owns a 50% stake in GHI, which is allowed as long as the public office holder doesn't manage or operate the business. Boissonnault's office denies he communicated with Anderson about the Gowie Group, saying he is not the Randy in the texts. The Gowie Group has filed a lawsuit alleging Anderson has stolen the nearly $500,000 deposit and committed fraud. Boissonnault is not named in that lawsuit, and Anderson denies the claim. Anderson said another Randy works at GHI, but would not disclose the employee's full name. Global News was unable to verify any details related to a second employee named Randy. Farah?
Krista Hessey in Toronto. Thank you, Krista. A First Nation in northwestern Ontario is suing the provincial and federal governments over mercury poisoning. Grassy Narrows First Nation has been plagued with mercury poisoning since the 1960s. It alleges the governments allowed the river system to be contaminated by a paper mill upstream, then failed to clean up the toxic waste. And now a new study from Western University says the mercury contamination has been made worse by ongoing industrial pollution from the mill.
There's a new generation of young people that are being born every day, and they are, being born to a contaminated river with contaminated fish. Our economy's been destroyed. Our way of life has been destroyed.
Mercury is harmful to people who eat contaminated fish or drink the water. The lawsuit is seeking protection for the nearby river and Grassy Narrows territory and for industrial land use in, on, or near the territory to be prohibited if it infringes on treaty rights. America's president uses his executive authority. Coming up, what Joe Biden will do if too many people try to illegally cross the U.S.-Mexico border. In the U.S., President Joe Biden announced sweeping new measures to temporarily close America's border with Mexico to migrants, which suspends protection for asylum seekers. The White House has been under intense pressure from Republicans and some Democrats to reduce the number of people crossing the southern border illegally. Jackson Prosco reports.
Facing a crisis of human migration at the southern border, U.S. President Joe Biden announced a sweeping executive order aiming to stem the flow of millions of asylum seekers.
This ban will remain in place until the number of people trying to enter illegally is reduced to a level that our system can effectively manage.
The president's plan only targets people who cross into the U.S. illegally, denying them the right to claim asylum and deporting them. The asylum shutdown is triggered whenever more than 2,500 people per day illegally enter. Right now, it's nearly double that.
If the United States doesn't secure our border, there's no limit to the number of people who may try to come here.
The surge in illegal migration has been driven by political instability in Latin America, while a backlog in U.S. immigration courts has become a beacon for the desperate.
You make an asylum claim and you're pretty much guaranteed 3, 4, 5, 6 years of living in this country lawfully while you wait for that hearing.
A bipartisan group of lawmakers tried to pass similar border legislation earlier this year. It fell apart after Republicans walked away at the urging of former President Donald Trump.
What the White House is doing today is they're just playing a political game.
The White House insists it will not deport unaccompanied children, but progressives see Biden's policy as a throwback to the Trump era.
We were told that President Biden would be restoring humanity at our border.
In an election year, with immigration a top concern, the White House insists it had no choice but to take drastic action to slow the tide of humanity flowing north. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
The Israeli military has launched a ground offensive into central Gaza's Burj refugee camp and says troops are being backed by airstrikes. According to local hospital officials, one strike that hit the camp killed at least 11 Palestinians, including 3 children and a woman. A statement from Israel's military says it's targeting Hamas positions. The incursion's happening as international mediators wait for Israel and Hamas to respond to a new ceasefire proposal. Modi's majority in doubt ahead, how India's prime minister will likely need allies to secure another term. The scale of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's victory is nowhere near what he wanted. If Modi is to form government for a third term, he will have to rely on coalition partners. Redmond Shannon reports.
Celebrating victory, but not the type he had hoped for. This is a win for the world's largest democracy, says Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, notably referencing his alliance of parties along with his own BJP party. In India's previous 2 elections, Modi's BJP alone won enough seats for a majority. This time, he will fall short and needs the support of allied parties to govern.
इंडिया गठबंधन की मीटिंग है.
Prominent opposition leader Rahul Gandhi says he's not conceding just yet, waiting to see if his alliance could somehow cobble together a majority.
I think there are inducements in terms of high positions which are going in the direction of these parties, sort of kingmaker type parties, from both of the major political parties.
During the campaign, Hindu nationalist Modi said an opposition vote would amount to a jihadi vote. He wanted his alliance to win a supermajority, necessary to push through constitutional changes feared by minority groups. Those among the reasons fewer voters opted for Modi, according to political analyst Subir Sinha.
They felt that they were being taken for fools, and that, the real issues were being sidetracked, and just the relentless Hindu-Muslim polarization.
If Modi does secure a third term, he will be just the second Indian leader to do so since independence. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Next, the percentage of Germans wanting their country to take a tougher line on immigration. You're looking at Juno Beach in Normandy, France. Global National is back in a moment.
"80 years ago on these beaches in northern France, the fate of Europe was hanging in the balance. Canadian forces, alongside our allies, fought and died here to defeat the tyranny and racial hatred of the Nazis' barbarous regime. Now the far right is on the rise again. Nationalist parties have won elections in Italy, Hungary, the Netherlands, lead the polls in France, Austria, and Belgium, and have a stake in governments in Finland and Slovakia. And polls in Germany, where I was last week, show 1 in 5 people now support the far-right AfD party, and immigration is the big driver.
After I go to university.
Anas Modamani's extraordinary story is a tale of how Germany has changed and how this one selfie changed his life. He fled the war in Syria and arrived in Germany at age 17.
It was a wonderful time for me. People were so happy to welcome us. I felt very much at home.
That was 2015. Germany's Angela Merkel famously welcomed more than 1 million refugees that year, mostly Syrians. In 2022, the EU accepted 5.1 million immigrants, and Germany has taken in more than any country in Europe. So many, Berlin's enormous Tempelhof airport, where Hitler held huge rallies and which later became a lifeline for West Berlin during the Cold War, was turned into a shelter to house them. Meant to be temporary, 9 years later, 1,500 people from 20 countries still live here.
I want to change my life.
Hassan Sisi arrived 4 months ago from Sierra Leone. He shares this shipping container with 3 other men.
And what do you hope to find in Germany?
Yeah, it's opportunity, and I know I will make it in life.
It won't be easy. The mood has hardened. Immigration is a huge economic pressure, and recent polling shows 86% of Germans are worried about it. Far-right groups such as Generation Identity are seizing on that.
Komplexere Geschichte. Wir haben in Deutschland.
We have in Germany and in Europe a migration crisis.
Their solution? Remigration, forcing people to go back where they came from and not allowing others in. They hired this boat in the Mediterranean. Their message, especially to migrants from the Middle East and Africa, you will not make Europe home. They believe no one who gets to Germany by passing through another country should be allowed to stay.
So that would mean Germany would have no refugees then? Because
Exactly.
Germany's not connected to any of those countries in the Middle East.
Exactly what we say, yeah.
Anti-immigrant parties like Germany's AfD could win as many as a quarter of the seats in this week's elections for European Parliament. Among its slogans, Save the World. Let's start with Germany.
Before you invite someone over for dinner, you have to first make sure you have a full fridge.
And the guy who took that happy selfie with Angela Merkel, it made him the most recognizable refugee in Germany, which turned him into a target of the far right. Fake stories and doctored photos were posted linking him to terrorist attacks. For a time, he was afraid to be seen on the street.
I have lived with racism and hatred. I know what it feels like.
He's a German citizen now with a good job, grateful for his new life, but well aware it would be much harder if he were arriving in Europe today. That is Global National for this Tuesday from Juno Beach in Normandy, France. People here have not forgotten what Canadian troops did for them. Even 80 years later, they pay tribute. These pipers are marching past Maison de Canadienne, the first house to be liberated by Canadian troops on Juno Beach. The significance, the sacrifice of helping bring peace to Western Europe is not lost on people here. We are very grateful to Canadians, this man tells me, who came from far away to rid us of the Nazis. We thank them. I'm Dawna Friesen. Thanks for watching. We will be back from Normandy tomorrow.